Hi. Hello. Apologies in advance. We are not going to be having the ambient backyard ASMR that we desire. Because it's not early enough in the day, and my quiet neighborhood has transformed into a construction site that never freaking stops. And it's been that way for years. Anyone want to buy my house? Okay, that's not why we're here. I want to talk about Simone Biles. I have been watching the Summer Olympics. I managed to hurt my back a little bit about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks ago, so I've had to spend more time. I've had an excuse to sit around watching the Olympics. That's probably the better way to put it. The Olympics is the only type of sports that I like to watch. It's the only sports I care about. I freaking love the Olympics. And I realize that the Olympics are problematic AF. I've actually wanted to make a lot of little sit-down rambles about my thoughts on the Olympics. So stay tuned for more thoughts on the Olympics if anybody wants to know what my thoughts are. I don't know why you would, but you clicked the video, so a little bit of context that nobody asked for. I love the Olympics. My favorite sport in the whole world is gymnastics. So, when Simone Biles entered my field of view the last Summer Olympics, I know she's been, a big thing in gymnastics for like a while. I fell, with my back injury and with the Olympics coming up, I fell down this like big rabbit hole of gymnastics and really like got reintroduced to gymnastics and the culture and all of it. So I say all of this to give you like a little bit of context because I'm a person who's very interested in gymnastics. I've always loved gymnastics and thought they were cool. I don't know very much about the sport, but I care enough to have opinions. So I do kind of hope that maybe I could like attract like some actual gymnastics experts because I want to let's have a discussion about gymnastics. I'm so interested. But probably there's just going to be some randos who just, want to hear about Simone Biles, and that's fine too. Sound off in the comments. But these are kind of like, I have thoughts about gymnastics and I have thoughts about Simone. So let's get into these thoughts. My thoughts are, seeing Simone pull out of events at the Olympics is so disappointing for me just as a fan of gymnastics because I want to see what she's going to do. I think like everybody else in the world, I was really, wanting to see what she was going to do. I have like, thoughts about the amount of pressure that goes on in the Olympics because it's like such a world stage. But I mean, like, guys, Simone Biles been doing these flips and twists, at competitions. Like, it's not like the Olympics is your only chance to see her do it. So, it's really just, the Olympics is such a big deal. I get that. And it's huge. And it's a lifelong dream for so many people. And there are so many people who will work so hard and make unbelievable sacrifices to get there. And that's kind of like the context of what I approach this with because, Simone Biles herself has had to make incredible sacrifices, like all the gymnasts who are at the Olympics and all the gymnasts who never will make an Olympic team. Falling down my rabbit hole of gymnastics, I watched the first couple episodes of the Golden Gymnastics documentary before it got taken down from YouTube, and I watched. So I did watch the coverage of the Winter Cup before the Olympics, and I watched like a lot of commentary. I just been watching lots of stuff about the Olympics, and so I do have some thoughts. I think it was shocking to me how honestly incredibly bad the sport is. It makes me think about and I mean like the culture, and I know that especially in American gymnastics there's like a concerted effort to shift that culture. And I think that Simone Biles deciding not to risk her life flipping at the Olympics is part of that culture shift, and I think that she's leading the pack. She's leading the charge on that. And what I think that culture shift is, at its very roots, that culture shift is in realizing that these gymnasts are people. They're human beings with lives and families. Like, they're not show ponies to just be trotted out to do their tricks and go back in their stable. And the amount of esteem that we place on like being an Olympic medalist, a gold medal champion, the amount of esteem and weight and emphasis that we put on that prize, that accomplishment, is not proportionate when it comes to the Olympics. It is not proportionate to the risk and sacrifice that the athletes are making. And that's just a fact. I think that this goes across the board for, you know, all Olympics, but I think, you know, to keep it somewhat specific, really, like when you think of gymnastics, because, and the reason, so one of the documentaries I was watching mentioned that, you know, there's acute injuries and there's repetitive injuries, and gymnastics has the highest rate of both. So, you know, going off of that, it's like, is it the most dangerous sport? Like, and honestly, yeah, like it probably is, right? So if gymnastics is because it's not just how high they are, it's like, if you really like all the people who are saying that Simone Biles should have went out there and she's like weak for quitting, have you ever watched gymnastics? Have you ever watched Simone do gymnastics? Have you ever watched someone crack their head on a beam, on a balance beam from a trick gone wrong? Because I have recently. And I don't know if people are just like missing the context for how incredibly dangerous that sport is, or the context for how every single one of those gymnasts is also a human being. But guys, put that in context. All sports are dangerous at the elite level, but I mean, gymnastics is horrifyingly dangerous. and the stakes are so high if you mess up, right? All those people who, you know, think that Simone Biles is weak or let down her country or whatever, her team or herself or her supporters or whatever. Anybody who's disappointed in Simone Biles for not, you know, attempting an apparatus or a routine that she doesn't feel mentally is a good idea for her. I just want to know, like, what would you prefer? Like, what do you want to see? Do you want to see Simone Biles at the Olympics, like, cracking her head on a balance beam on a missed dismount, getting lost in the air on the vault and landing on her head? Do you want to see her fucking die? Is that what you want to see? Guys, it's just a sport. I know that people have made incredible sacrifices to get there. Are we asking her to sacrifice her life? And for what? And for what are you asking her to risk her life for? I haven't heard anybody say this, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say, listen, as a black woman, she owes America nothing. Okay? America's only proud of their black people when their black people are champions. Let's be honest. And I'm not trying to point fingers because I understand that my country I can address our history in a whole different thing. But I'm just making the observation that she does not owe America anything. And as an SA survivor, as a victim of USA Gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar, she owes US Gymnastics nothing. You know, learning a little bit about like the culture of US Gymnastics, so you know that they've, the sexual abuse, the food restrictions, the EDs, the verbal and mental abuse, you know, like the abuses are so widespread. There's so many abusive coaches and they looked the other way. US Gymnastics looked the other way for years because they cared more about results than they did about the women and girls whose lives were being destroyed by that organization. And again, I ask for what? For the chance to compete at the Olympics, for the chance to bring home a gold medal for your country, and then what? And then maybe you make a career out of it. Maybe if you get enough attention, maybe if you're like a Simone Biles or Michael Phelps, people might remember your name 5 years later. but you're still going to have to probably remain in that sport for the rest of your life, working as a gym or a coach, opening up a gym or working as a coach or doing private lessons, like with bodies that have already been broken and destroyed by this sport before they even, you know, reach their physical prime. This is like the best case scenario for someone in US gymnastics. What about the worst case scenario? What about all the people who were injured before they ever made it? What about all the people who sacrificed their childhoods, who were homeschooled so that they, through all of high school, so that they could train 40 hours a week for the chance to go to the Olympics? What about those girls who were abused by their coaches, who they spent more time with than their parents, who were sexually assaulted, who were essayed by the medical staff that were there to keep them safe, who were forced to compete on acute injuries? Like, and this is not America. This is like, you know, pretty much like I think that this is kind of like a culturally gymnastics thing, and I know it happens in like the dance world and lots of other, you know, cultures that are real focused on perfection. And we don't need to get into all of that right now, but considering what Simone Biles and other gymnasts, other elite gymnasts endured in the US gymnastics system, they owe US gymnastics nothing. As far as her team, by dropping out, she's opened up spots for other people to compete. Sunita Lee just took a gold in women's all, you know, she has not hurt her team at all. Her team loves her. They know her and they see her as a human first. So get their names out of your mouth. It's pretty clear that Simone Biles has decided to take a role as an advocate for athletes. She wants to make sure, like many people in like many gymnasts, she wants to make sure that the abuses that she endured, the unnecessary abuses and the unnecessary sacrifices that she made to get to where she is, are not repeated. She wants to make sure that there are no more young girls whose lives are literally ended because their coaches forced them to do a routine that they didn't feel up to that day, or their coaches or their fans forced them to perform in a competition that they weren't up to that day. Gymnastics are dangerous. Elite gymnastics are dangerous. Elite gymnastics that Simone Biles is attempting are dangerous. So this pivots me into something else I wanted to talk about, which is just gymnastics like in general. You know, Simone now has 2, if not 3 skills named after her, meaning that she was the first one to successfully perform them in competition. But what's happening is her, up to the Olympics, there has been some friction with her and the people, whatever, who come up with a code of points in gymnastics, because her new her new skills are being undervalued on the difficulty level. And the reason that they're being undervalued is because they don't want people attempting these before they're ready. They don't want people attempting these skills before they're ready. I keep calling them tricks because I think that it puts it into perspective a little more. I'm not trying to trivialize the accomplishment, because I know it's not just like do a trick. I understand there's a lot of training that goes into it. But I think that when you say you're literally asking this woman to like risk her life doing a trick on a beam, I think it really puts it into perspective. That at the end of the day, like, it's a trick. It is. It's a skill, absolutely. But you know, when you see how many people miss their landings, pivoting back into my point. So I understand that like the code of points is there to kind of help guide the sport, and that there have been times all throughout gymnastics history where certain skills have been undervalued or even banned. And there's lots of reasons why they might ban skills. They might ban skills because they're just too dangerous and they don't want, you know, one of them, I can't think of what it's called, but I know a Russian gymnast, and it's the one where it's in tumbling and they're like up in whatever, and they land on like basically they gotta land on their shoulders and roll out. But if you land wrong, you land on your neck and then you're paralyzed. And this particular Russian gymnast, I wish I could remember her name. Maybe I should grab my laptop. Oh, Alina Mukina. I just came across an article that was written 2 years ago. It's called The Medal Count, an old school gymnastics blog. Yeah, she won the all-around at the Olympics and then injured her neck in a training accident. She landed awkwardly on her neck and snapped her spine. The injury was catastrophic, leaving her paralyzed from the neck down. It also meant that her gymnastics career was over and Mukina would never make it to the Olympics. I want to know what's the name of it. The Thomas Salto? This is an interesting headline. The tragic story of Alina Mukina, the gymnast who wasn't allowed to say no, like Simone. So, we know about Alina Mukina because she's a gold medalist. But what about all the girls and women who trained to become gold medalists, who were injured before they ever got there, who were pushed to do these skills before they ever got there? So this is why these skills get banned, because they're just too dangerous. And I mean, some of them I think it's pretty obvious, like the one that caused Alina Mukina's paralysis. Let's not be landing on our heads. Let's just not. I think that was a good call. And then there are other times when the code of points will there are other times when the code of points, you know, they'll ban things because they're too dangerous. They're undervaluing a lot of Biles's skills, new skills, because they're so dangerous that they don't want other people attempting them. And I have issues with that. And then the other reason that they might devalue points or ban them is just because it might be moving the sport in a direction that they don't necessarily want to go. And I can think of a couple examples as just a bit of a gymnast fan where that would be the case. One of them is there used to be a thing on the uneven bars where you would stand on the low bar and jump to the high bar. They banned it because it was considered dangerous, but also, like, if people start jumping, like standing on bars and using them to jump, that's going to change like the way that apparatus is used. That's going to change the flow of the sport, the type of routines, etc. Another great example I can think of would be like when I said men's tumbling is just honestly not even that fun for me to watch anymore, because it's just like 4 tumbling passes and they're done. There's no performance aspect. That's because of the code of points, right? In men's gymnastics, they've basically, like, you can use the code of points to shape and mold the sport, to kind of direct the future of the sport. And I think that's fine. I think that lots of, you know, the same thing happens in like Iceland with language. What a weird example, but that's what it makes me think of. Like there's like literally like a governing body that dictates the development of this language into the future. And so I'm sure in other, you know, I'm sure that this can happen in sports, and there's lots of other contexts where there are governing bodies who kind of try to dictate or try to guide the growth of the sport in the future. So I can see reasons why certain skills would be undervalued. And so I want to know why Biles's new skills are being undervalued in the code of points. Like, that's what I kind of want to know, because to me the thing is, like, after watching a lot of gymnastics recently, you know, people are falling off the beam, off the bars, not sticking their vaults. Like, people are falling at this elite level. And I know that gymnastics is technically actually amateur, and there's also pros, but so I don't know. Someone explain me. But I do think that we'll all agree that, like, Olympics is elite sports. Elite amateur, I don't know. It's so weird. So if these are the best gymnasts in the world, and like a quarter of them are falling on one apparatus or the other, like, what does that mean? What does that tell us? To me, and this goes hand in hand with how difficult the sport, or how dangerous the sport is, but also how difficult. Well, here we go. Is it because of its difficulty, or is it because of its danger? Difficulty versus danger. This is the question. Because to me, seeing so many gymnasts fall, and I know this is a bit of a strange Olympics because they haven't been able to compete and stuff, but I still think, people who are more into gymnastics, correct me if I'm wrong, but you do see a lot of gymnasts fall, and it just seems to me like it's one or two things. Please someone tell me, educate me, right? Because is it that these gymnasts are attempting skills that are above their skill level, and so they're not able to execute them consistently? They're not at that stage yet in that skill? Or is it just an incredibly difficult skill, and like the slightest gust of, you know what I mean? Like anything could happen, and this is just what happens even at the elite level? People fall all the time. I don't know. So I guess my question is the occurrence of gymnasts falling, is this a reflection of them attempting skills in competition that are beyond their grasp, or is this just a reflection of how incredibly difficult the sport is? I don't know. Please someone tell me. But it seems to me that, and there's kind of two things at play here though, because if you're gonna try, oh look, the sun's coming out. If you're going to try to discourage gymnasts from attempting skills that are harder than they can do, I feel like I feel as a not huge gymnast knowledge person, that's real English. I feel like I'm seeing a lot of people attempting skills that are beyond them. So I guess like you see Simone, I can't remember what the name of it is, a double pike. I don't know. She does something on the vault. She's like the first woman, the only female gymnast to do it. The men do it. Female gymnasts don't do it. Hold on. Why don't I just research that too? A round off back handspring with half turn entry, front stretch, somersault with 2 twists. So it's an upgrade from the Chang. This is Wikipedia, so I'm not going to get T. Here we go. Simone Biles is so dominant. This is an article from Insider from May 26, 2021. Simone Biles is so dominant that scoring rules are holding her back for the safety of others and keeping competitions closer than they should be. That's the headline from Insider. Y'all want to see it? Proof. Boom. There. Like I'd make up a headline. Why? You know, she has been dominating. She's been doing skills that no woman has ever done before. And she's not getting the recognition for it that she should. First of all, so why would she even risk her life? Just as a side note, honestly, when I was watching the team, so I was watching the gymnastics team competition, and she did her vault, and the announcers were just like, why was it valued at 5.8 difficulty? Why 5.8 difficult? Like, they were just like shook. They couldn't figure it out. These are like announcers. Like, you'd think that they would have noticed that she missed a full rotation in her vault, but they didn't. And they kept waiting for like the US team to challenge the judges on the difficulty. And then, you know, Simone came out and said she's pulling out, and that's the rest is history. So I initially thought that she had decided to pull out because there was already this drama leading up to her new skills being undervalued by the code of points. And I mean, what does that really mean? What's really going on there? Because it's like, if she's the only woman in the world who can do this vault, but then you're mad that she's pushing the sport further than anyone ever has, but that's like the whole point. It's like so weird. It's so hard to understand why she would be doing skills that are more difficult than any other skill. She's the only person in the world who can do them, and she's not getting difficulty ratings for it. Like, it's so hard to understand. And you know she's just doing it, like, at this point because she can. That's what she said. So my thought before all this came out, when I first, you know, I was watching her and I watched her pull out, and I thought the reason was because if they're not even going to, like, award her the difficulty for the vaults that she's doing, let alone recognize her for the new vaults that she's pioneering, like, what is even the freaking point? Like, literally, what is the point? If she's not going to be recognized for her contribution to the sport, then, like, literally fucking why? But, you know, just because, I mean, I'm sure that once Simone Biles retires and other people start doing those skills, I bet you that the difficulty will be raised. Just saying, it's a thought. And you know, is there... There's so much to unpack with all of it, and I just don't know if I want to get into all of it, but you know, it's interesting that you have a black athlete come into a sport that's been predominantly white, and that this black athlete comes in and absolutely dominates, and then somehow we don't want to recognize that. I don't know. It's just a little weird. It just looks a little weird to me. But it might not be racially motivated at all. It really might just be that they want to keep the gymnasts safe, because a lot of the skills that Simone does, she's the only person who can do them. And seeing how incredibly like toxic and abusive, you know, a gymnastics environment is, it does kind of seem like it's a good call to try to discourage people from doing these different, because you know that if you incentivize people to do these crazy things, their coaches are going to push them to do it, or the gymnasts themselves are going to push themselves to do it before they're ready, and they're going to get hurt and they're going to have injuries. But if that's the real concern, then why do we have so many gymnasts coming to the Olympics doing skills that they probably can't do anyway and falling? Or maybe they can do them and everybody falls, I don't know. But what I'm really trying to get at here is, it seems to me as though if the goal was really to reduce, like, injuries, I feel like execution should be worth more. Like, instead of like 10 points for execution, it should be like 20 points for execution, and all of, you know what I mean? So that the difficulty isn't weighted so heavily. Or you should really get dinged for execution. Like, you should not be able to come out with this, you know, like, if you go out and do a skill and you don't nail it, it's not worth it. Like, I feel like that's, if you really want to keep gymnasts safe, That's how the code of points should work. It shouldn't be about devaluing difficult skills because you're afraid people will attempt them. It should be about aggressively dinging people on execution so that they don't attempt them in competition before they're ready, so that it's just not even worth it. And I really like, watching the Olympics, like a clean routine doesn't, like, I don't know if anybody goes out there and performs 4 clean routines on all 4 apparatusi. And maybe they do. I'm not sure. You don't always get to watch every single person. But on the other hand, if you were to really hold people to a different standard in terms of execution, you're going to see a lot less exciting gymnastics. That's for sure, right? If it's not worth it to attempt something that you can't always nail, you're not going to attempt it in competition. And that means we're going to see a lot less big tries, big things. And honestly, it's a spectator sport. I mean, if it's not fun to watch, then is there a point? I mean, I would say that the athletes are definitely the most important thing. And is it a spectator sport? I mean, is it for the audience? Who is it for? I guess that's the question with all sports. Who is this for? Especially on the professional level. But those are my rambling thoughts. I wish I had structured them better, but I really was just watching gymnastics coverage and I just had thoughts and had to share them. So I can absolutely guarantee you that every single person on the internet who's criticizing Simone Biles has not accomplished a tenth of what she has in their lives. And so they're just armchair critics. Their words mean literally nothing. They don't know what they're talking about. They have no context. But I will just say, I will reiterate that Simone Biles does not owe anybody anything. She owes herself. She owes her loved ones who've supported her. And I think that she thinks that she owes something to young gymnasts. And gosh, I could go all into that. Man, this is going to be an hour long. It was supposed to be 15 minutes. So it's interesting, right? Because I think there really needs to be a focus away from medals and money and winning, especially at the Olympics. And I don't just mean in gymnastics, I mean across the board, in all these sports. Opening it back up to the Olympics again, it makes me think of something that Ronda Rousey said in interviews, which is, if you remember, she actually is a bronze medalist in judo. And it was kind of heartbreaking for her because I think she was favored for gold, maybe, or silver. It doesn't matter. And her mom was also a judo champion. So she has a bronze medal in judo, and she said, she realized just how little being an Olympian means when she was having a conversation with somebody, and she said, they were getting to know each other. She'd met someone, and she said, oh yeah, I have a bronze medal in judo at the Olympics. And that person said, cool, I collect stamps. And she said that was when she realized that, she didn't put it in these words, but this is how I take it, that, I think that in that moment she realized that, all the decades of training and sacrifice, mental sacrifice, social sacrifice, physical sacrifice, all those years and decades of training and of being an exceptional human. People who go to the Olympics are the best of the best. They've made sacrifices that most of us will not dream of. They work through pain and injuries that most of us can't comprehend. They adhere to training schedules that I could never. And maybe that's why I love the Olympics so much, because of the passion. God, I just love human passion. And it's so much about love of the sport and pride in country. And I think that's why I love the Olympics. But when you see that these athletes will sacrifice so much, and even the ones who get to the absolute top, the pinnacle, 5 years later, it's like it never happened, to the rest of the world. And yet we dare to put this pressure and expectation on Simone. So it's time for sports to become about the athletes. It's time for the Olympics to become about the athletes. Simone withdrawing from events is about Simone. And it's also about being an example to future gymnasts, because, in previous generations, they didn't have the option to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to risk my life today. And now, because of Simone, gymnasts will. They will have that option. And their countries might win fewer medals, and those gymnasts might accomplish less. Like, I just have this, like, voice in my head of, like, this, I'm sorry, it's a stereotype, but this is not a real person, so I think it's okay. But, like, this stereotype of just this, like, right-leaning, middle-aged, like, boomer, right-wing man, you know, going on about letting people down and being a quitter and bootstraps and all the rest of that bullshit. My dog also thinks it's bullshit. I gotta get him out of my flower bed. And I think part of the reason that that character is a man of that generation, a boomer man, is because there's like this other, like I was born in the 80s. So I was raised with an awareness of this whole like Soviets versus the Americans rivalry. That was really like a thing. And I don't mean like in gymnastics, I just mean like in general, in hockey, in all of it. That, you know, it's always been like the commies versus the freedom fighters, or like whatever the fucking media spin is on it. You know, it's interesting because I know that American gymnastics has made a real shift since the last Olympics. It's only been, 4 years, so how much of a shift has it been? But you do hear people talking about how, well, first of all, like, they get to eat, right? Like, U.S. gymnastics is not about starvation anymore and EDs. It's about, treating your body, like you're an athlete, and eating like you're an athlete, and seeing a nutritionist like you're an athlete, and, not like blacking out, like people are going to get on their soapbox about how dangerous the sport is, but then meanwhile be like freaking blacking out while they're on the beam. Like, come on now, this is ridiculous. Like, do better. So, you got your Soviets versus your Americans, big rivalry of the world, of intergenerational conflict here. I can just hear those right-leaning boomer men saying, like, this is what happens when you raise a generation of snowflakes. And, we have a generation of babies. We have a generation of quitters. And first of all, like, fuck you, sir. Like, how are you gonna, like, sit and criticize freaking Simone Biles? Criticize me. Go for it. What have I done? But, like, don't criticize someone who's done more than you. It's ridiculous. You look stupid. Okay, so the kinder, gentler American gymnastics approach is more athletes first. It's, there's a focus on mental health. And could America win fewer medals because of it? Could gymnasts not work up to their, not get to such great heights because of it? Because so what? So what if they get fewer medals? Like, I love the Olympics, but, like, guys, it really is just a game. Like, it's the games. Come on, it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to see who's the best. It's not supposed to be what country can churn through more human capital in an attempt to make a point. Okay, that's dark. That's gross. That's not what the Olympics is supposed to be about, I'm pretty sure. I just think it's so incredibly unfair that Simone Biles and lots of gymnasts and athletes like her have literally endured a lifetime of sacrifice and questionable treatment. And now she's being told that she owes them. She owes the world. She owes her country. She owes her sport. She owes nobody nothing. She owes it to herself to live past 24 years old and to pursue a future as bright as she deserves, and to be the advocate for the sport that she's dedicated her life to. Maybe she feels that she owes it to the young athletes who look up to her, to be an example of not putting your life in danger for a sport, for a game, for a medal, for a prize, for the glory. Why? Pretty sure I'm just rambling at this point. I'll have to cut a bunch of this, but thanks for listening. What are your thoughts? What do you think? Do you think that people need to leave Simone Biles alone? Because I do. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe if you want to. If you don't want to, don't, obviously. Like it if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't. But really, like, Like, let me know your thoughts. Did I wrap up my whole little, like, snowflake rant there? I feel like I did. Bye.